So, tonight we're diving into the weird world of Victorian dating. And trust me, if you think modern dating is a mess with all its apps and mixed signals, just wait until you hear about the maze of etiquette books, chaperones, and social rules that controlled every single interaction between men and women back in the 1850s. We're talking about a time when even eye contact came with a rule book. Lifting your hat was basically sending a message, and getting a gift from the wrong person could ruin your reputation forever. Oh, and by the way, if you're into stories like this, I'd really love it if you hit like or subscribe. I'm genuinely curious where everyone's tuning in from. So drop a comment with your location and time zone. I'm always amazed how folks from all over the world end up dozing off to this stuff. All right, get comfy, take a deep breath, and let your body melt into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to London, 1855, and believe me, you'll be super thankful for that mattress by the time we're done. Victorians had a saying about making love, but it's not what you think. Back then, making love meant flirting, the art of wooing someone properly. And if you wanted to survive Victorian dating, you better know the rules. So congrats. You just woke up in May 1855, right in the heart of London. But not the London you know. This is Queen Victoria's London, where coal smoke hung thick like morning fog. Horse hooves clattered on cobblestones outside your window, and the smell, the smell was something else. The Thames at the end of your street carried the sewage of 2.5 million people, and on warm days like today, that lovely aroma drifted right into your bedroom. You wrinkle your nose and pull your heavy wool blankets up to your chin. The good news, you're 22 and from a respectable middle-class family. Your dad owns a small but successful grocery store, which means you've got enough cash for decent clothes and food, but not enough to be totally idle. The bad news, you're a woman in 1855, so your entire future hinges on one thing: landing the right husband. And the rules for that are as complicated as juggling teacups during a waltz. You stretch your legs under coarse cotton sheets, feeling the weight of the heavy blanket pressing on your chest. This house has no central heating that won't be invented for decades. So every morning starts with bone-chilling cold seeping through stone walls. Your maid got up at 5 a.m. to stoke the coal fire downstairs, and you can hear her heavy footsteps on the wooden stairs as she hauls the coal bucket up to warm your bedroom. Lovely. That bucket weighs about 30 pounds when full, and she'll be lugging dozens of them up and down those stairs before her day's done. The bedroom door creaks open, and Mary steps in. Her arms ache from the weight of the coal, and her hands are black with soot. You notice how she favors her left shoulder, probably strained from the heavy lifting. She kneels by your fireplace, and you watch her nimble hands expertly arrange wood and coal with practiced ease. The first sparks flicker, then spread, and before long a small orange glow starts to chase away the morning chill. "Good morning, miss," Mary says, wiping her soot-streaked hands on her apron. "Mother said you need to dress nicely today. The Weatherbees are coming this afternoon, and they'll be bringing their son." Your stomach flips a bit. The Weatherbees. You've heard about their son, Thomas, 26, just back from India. where he worked as a clerk for the East India Company. Your mother's been hinting about this visit for weeks, and you know exactly what it means. This isn't just a social call, it's an inspection. You sit up in bed, feeling the cool air brush your shoulders through your cotton nightgown. The fire's warmed the room a bit, but it'll be another hour before the chill really fades. Chest. This house has no central heating. It wouldn't be invented for decades, so every morning starts with bone-chilling cold seeping through stone walls. Your maid got up at 5 a.m. to stoke the coal fire downstairs. You can hear her heavy footsteps on the wooden stairs as she hauls the coal bucket up too. Light the fire in your bedroom. Fantastic. That bucket weighs about 30 pounds full, and she'll lug dozens of them up and down those stairs before her shift ends. The bedroom door swings open, and Mary steps in. Her arms are dead tired from the coal's weight. Her hands are black with soot. You notice how she favors her left shoulder, probably strained from lifting all that heavy stuff. She kneels by your hearth, and you watch her nimble hands arrange wood and coal with quick, practiced moves. The first sparks flicker, then spread, and before long, a small orange glow chases away the morning chill. "Good morning, miss," Mary says, wiping her soot-covered hands. On her apron, "Your mother said you have to dress properly today. There's a weather forecaster coming this afternoon, and they'll be bringing their son." Your stomach twists a bit. The Weatherbees you've heard about. Their son, Thomas, 26 years old, just back from India, where he worked as a clerk for the East India Company. Your mom's been hinting about this visit for weeks, and you know exactly what it means. This isn't just a polite call. It's an inspection. You sit up in bed, feeling the cool air brush your shoulders through your cotton nightgown. The fire's made the room warmer, but it'll take another hour for the cold to really disappear. You watch Mary move around, sorting clothes for you to wear today. Not just any clothes, but your finest dress, dark blue wool with tiny mother-of-pearl buttons that your mother saved for 3 months to buy. "Mary," you say, voice still rough from sleep. "What do you know about Weatherby's son?" She glances toward the door, then leans in closer. "Yes, miss. I heard their maid say he has straight teeth, which you can't say for most gentlemen his age. And she said he doesn't drink much, though he's fond of cigars." She pauses, adjusting your corset on the bed. Of course, he's been in India for 4 years, so he might have picked up some strange ideas about everything. The corset. You look at it resignedly. Every morning, Mary laces you into this whalebone and cotton torture device, squeezing your ribs until you can barely breathe. It's designed to give you the perfect hourglass figure that's all the rage right now, but that also means you'll spend the day feeling like someone's hugging your waist tightly but politely. You swing your legs out of bed and your bare feet hit the cold wooden floor. The floorboards are wide oak planks, polished smooth from decades of use, and they stay cold no matter how warm the fire gets. You stand up, and Mary immediately starts undoing your nightgown. This is normal. Women didn't really get privacy back then. Mary has seen you naked thousands of times, and she'll keep dressing and undressing you until you get married. Then your husband's servants will take over. First comes the chemise, a thin cotton layer that feels like you're wearing a tea towel. Then the corset. Mary wraps it around your waist and starts tightening the laces. With every pull, your breath gets a bit shallower. When she's done, you'll be sucking air like a fish. Deep breaths aren't really possible here, not so tight. Mary, you say, though you both know it's already as comfy as fashion allows. Of course not. Miss, your mother specifically said you must speak clearly when gentlemen call. Next come the layers. First, a chest pad tied around your waist. Basically a little pillow that pushes your dress out into the fashionable bell shape. Then 3 petticoats, each adding more volume and weight. When Mary pulls, first the tea towel, then the corset. Mary wraps it around your waist and starts tightening the laces. With every tug, your breathing gets a little shallower. When she's done, you'll be gasping for air like you've run a marathon. Deep breaths. Forget about it. Not happening here. Easy on the corset. Mary, you say that, even though both of you know it's already as tight as fashion law allows. Of course not. Madam, your mother specifically said you have to be able to speak clearly when the gentlemen call. Next up, layers. First, a padded belt tied around your waist. Basically, a tiny cushion pushing your skirt out into a bell shape. Then came the 3 petticoats, each adding more volume and weight. By the time Mary pulls the skirt over your head, you're wearing about 15 pounds of fabric, and that's before we even get to the shoes. The shoes are made of kid leather, soft and smooth to the touch, but completely flat. High heels, not in fashion for decades to come. They fasten tiny pearl buttons on the sides of your hips with a special hook. Your legs are wrapped in cotton stockings, safe but not exactly comfy. These shoes weren't designed for comfort, just for show. More for sitting in the parlor and taking dainty little steps. While Mary pinned your hair in the elaborate style, all the rage right now, parting it in the middle, then slicking it back into a low, shiny bun with carefully arranged curls framing your face. You wonder what might happen this afternoon. The Weatherby visit was basically a job interview, except the job was wife, and the interview involved sitting politely in the family parlor while both sets of parents watched every word, every gesture, every twitch. If Thomas Weatherby thought you were a fit, he might ask your dad to summon you if your dad agreed. The official courtship would begin, lasting anywhere from weeks to months. During that time, you'd never be alone with him. Every conversation happened under the watchful eye of a chaperone, usually your mom or Aunt Caroline, who lived with your family and had strong opinions about everything. Mary finished your hair and stepped back to admire her work. You caught your reflection in the small hand mirror on the dresser. Your face stared back, pale as fashion demanded, because having a tan meant you worked outside like a servant. Your lips had their natural color. Makeup was a no-go for unmarried women, so your eyebrows were all yours, dark and neatly groomed. The whole effect screamed innocence, modesty, and good breeding. Miss Mary said you looked lovely, and she was deadly serious. Now, I'll bring you breakfast. Shall I breakfast came on a tray, oatmeal with a dollop of cream, buttered toast, and tea strong enough to strip paint. The oatmeal was filling but bland. The toast, actually pretty good, freshly baked by the cook this morning. And the tea was exactly what you needed to wake up fully. You ate carefully, mindful of the tight corset, and anything dropped would stain your dark dress. After breakfast, your mom appeared at your door. At 45, she was still an attractive woman, though many childbirths and constant money worries had carved deep wrinkles around her eyes. She wore her second-best dress, dark brown wool trimmed with black, and her hair was styled like yours, but more severe. "Good morning, dear," she said, stepping into your room and closing the door behind her. "We need to talk before this afternoon." You set down your tea and gave her your full attention. These short talks usually packed important info. Now you knew why. The Weatherby visit was happening. She sat on the edge of your bed. Thomas needed a wife, and you needed a husband. It was a practical arrangement, but that didn't mean it couldn't be pleasant if both played nice. She paused, smoothing her dress. "I've exchanged letters with Mrs. Weatherby, and she told me some things about her son you should know. He's educated, has good prospects at the company, and has saved a fair sum during his time in India. According to his mother, he also wants to settle down and start a family." You nodded, even though little nerves twisted in your stomach. Starting a family was polite code for the physical bits of marriage no one talked about, but always lurked in every courtship like a shadow. Your mom continued, "Now, there are some rules you absolutely must follow this afternoon. First, you cannot accept any gifts from him, no matter how small. A gentleman shouldn't give presents to a woman he's not engaged to, and taking them implies you're encouraging his attention inappropriately. This was straight from the etiquette books your mom read obsessively. The young lady's friend, a woman he's not engaged to, and accepting them means you're encouraging his attention in a very inappropriate way." That's a direct quote from the etiquette books your mother reads obsessively. The Young Lady's Friend, published in 1837, specifically warns that one gift leads to another and encourages giving away your heart in the process. Second, you must not touch him in any way. No handshakes unless your father officially introduces you, and even then, keep it brief. If he extends his hand, you may lightly ignore it, but otherwise, fold your arms and place them on your lap. Try to imagine how weird this sounds to us today, when casual touching is just normal. But hey, different century, different rules. In 1855, physical contact between unmarried folks was a big no-no. Even engaged couples were only allowed to hold hands and exchange hot kisses, always under strict supervision. Step 3. Let him lead the conversation. But don't be afraid to show you're smart. He's been educated, so he'll appreciate a woman who can talk about more than just the weather. But don't directly contradict him. Even if you disagree, find a gentle way to express a different opinion. It's a fine line. Too smart, and you risk being seen as unladylike or intimidating. Too little, and you'll come off as boring or dumb. You've been practicing this balancing act your whole life. Finally, your mother says, "Reach up and fix that curl near your ear." Remember, he's sizing you up just as much as you're sizing him up. Watch how he treats the servants, how he talks to your father, how he reacts when things don't go according to plan. These little details tell you way more about his character than polite chats in the parlor. She stands, dusting off imaginary lint from her skirt. The weather forecast team will arrive at exactly 3 o'clock. We'll serve tea and some freshly made pastries from yesterday. You'll sit on the couch by the window. The light there is lovely. And I'll sit in the chair nearby. Your father will join us after he talks business with Mr. Weatherby. After your mother leaves, you find yourself with a few hours before the afternoon event. You head down the stairs to the family's tiny library, which is basically just a room with 2 bookshelves and a window seat, and pick out a volume of poetry. It's totally fine for young ladies to read poetry, even though novels were still a bit suspect. You sit by the window, trying to focus on the verses, but your mind keeps drifting to the upcoming afternoon. The house around you starts to come alive. You can hear pots and pans clanging in the kitchen as she prepares lunch. The maid sweeps the front steps, a chore done twice daily because of coal smoke and horse droppings on the street. Your father is in his study, poring over the shop's bookkeeping. The house smells like coal fire, beeswax polish, and the lavender perfume your mother uses to freshen the linens. Through the window, you watch the street outside. A milk cart rumbles by. The driver's voice rings clear through the glass as he calls out his wares. 2 women pass by, their skirts swaying with each step, arms linked as they chat. Both wear the same style as you dark colors, full skirts, fitted bodices, but you can tell they come from wealthy families by the quality of their fabrics. Behind them walks a maid, carrying luggage and keeping a safe distance. A gentleman on horseback gallops past, sitting tall in the saddle, his top hat perfectly placed. He's dressed in a dark tailcoat and light trousers, the daytime standard for men of his class. As he passes your window, he tips his hat politely, even though he doesn't know you. Totally normal. Gentlemen were expected to greet ladies, even strangers. With this small show of respect, the morning drifts slowly by. You read a few poems, help your mother arrange flowers in the front parlor, and practice a piece on the piano. Playing music was one of the accomplishments young ladies had to master, along with a bit of French, sewing, and drawing skills. You didn't have to be amazing at any of it, just competent enough to prove you'd been properly educated. Lunch is simple cold cuts, bread, cheese, and pickled vegetables. You eat little, partly because the corset makes big meals uncomfortable, and partly because you only need to be decent at these things. No need to be brilliant, just competent enough to prove you were properly educated. Lunch is simple cold cuts, bread, cheese, and pickles. You eat little, partly because the corset makes big meals uncomfortable, partly because you're too nervous to feel hungry. Your mother chats about neighbors and local gossip, but you can tell she's worried too. A good marriage will solve many of the family's financial worries and secure your future, no pressure. At 2:30, your mother announces it's time for final preparations. You head upstairs to check your look one last time. Mary lays out your new gloves, white cotton, buttoned at the wrist, ready for the grand debut. Your tiny necklace, the only piece of jewelry considered decent for an unmarried lady hosting guests. The pendant holds a miniature portrait of your grandmother and sits just below the high neckline of your dress. You have to practice sitting gracefully, which is way harder than it sounds with all these layers. The trick: lower yourself slowly so the dress hugs you just right. Then, fold your hands neatly in your lap. To stand, press your hands on the chair arms and rise gently, no brute force allowed. At 2:50, you're in the front parlor, sitting exactly where you were told, Mom's close by, hands on her lap, trying to keep busy. Dad stands by the fireplace, checking his pocket watch every few minutes. The room smells like beeswax and fresh flowers Mom arranged this morning. Late afternoon sun streams through the window, and you're hoping it looks as good as Mom promised. The clock on the mantel ticks toward 3. Every second drags longer than the last. Your palms are a bit sweaty inside the gloves, and you fight the urge to fiddle with your dress. This is it, the start of what might be the rest of your life. Exactly at 3, there's a sharp knock at the front door. Dad opens it, and you catch whispers from the men in the hall, polite greetings, the rustle of coats being removed, the tapping of canes on the umbrella stand. Then footsteps, heading toward the parlor, and your heart pounds beneath the stiff corset. Mr. Weatherby walks in first, Thomas's dad, a dapper gentleman with silver mustache and slightly stooped posture, probably from all those hours hunched over ledgers. Behind him, Mrs. Weatherby, a plump woman in a deep red silk dress, sparkling under the afternoon light. Finally, Thomas crosses the threshold, taller than you expected, with brown hair parted right down the middle and a neat mustache slicing across his slender face. His skin's a pale tan, showing he's spent years baking in Indian sun. His movements are precise military training. No doubt, he wears a long black coat down to his knees, gray pants, and a white shirt with a collar so tight it looks ready to choke him if he turns his head too fast. Mr. and Mrs. Weatherby, Dad announces with ceremony. I present my wife, Mrs. Hartwell, and my daughter, Miss Elenina Hartwell. You both rise smoothly, dress hugging you just so, like you've rehearsed 1,000 times. A slight knee bend, just enough to show respect without looking desperate. Miss Hartwell, Mrs. Weatherby says warmly, a pleasure to meet you both. Thomas is visibly excited for this introduction. He steps forward and bows lightly. Miss Hartwell. His voice is deeper than you expected, with just a hint of an accent you can't place, probably picked up abroad. Mr. Weatherby, you reply, glancing briefly into his eyes before lowering your gaze. Direct eye contact is okay for greetings. But staring too long is just rude. Everyone settles into their places like actors on a stage. Thomas sits opposite you, close enough to chat but polite enough to keep distance. Your parents arrange themselves as discreet chaperones, present but pretending to be engrossed in private chatter about acquaintances and local news. I trust your journey from India was pleasant, he says, because of course, women ask about travel. Indeed, though rather long, Thomas replies, 3 months at sea is plenty of time for reflection. I found myself ready to return to English soil and society. He pauses, and you catch something in his tone, maybe relief, or something else. You sit gracefully, letting the skirt hug your body like you've practiced 1,000 times. The two of you gently bounce your knees, just a little bounce and a slight tilt of the head. Too low shows low status, too high comes off as disrespectful. Miss Hartwell, Mrs. Weatherby says warmly, a pleasure to meet you both. Thomas is excited about this introduction. He steps forward and bows slightly. Miss Hartwell. His voice is deeper than you expected, with just a hint of an accent you can't place, maybe from time abroad. Mr. Weatherby, you reply, glancing briefly into his eyes before looking down. Direct eye contact is okay for greetings, but staring too long is rude. Everyone settles into their spots like actors on stage. Thomas sits across from you, close enough to chat, but distant enough to keep things polite. My parents arrange themselves as discreet chaperones present, but pretending to be absorbed in a private conversation about acquaintances and local news. I trust your trip from India was pleasant, he says, because women can ask about travel, indeed, though quite long. Thomas replies, 3 months at sea is plenty of time for reflection. I found myself ready to return to English soil and society. He pauses, and you notice something in his tone, maybe relief, or something else. The climate there can be challenging for those of us unused to such intensity. You nod sympathetically, though you've never been farther from London than Brighton. I guess the heat must have been unbearable. We certainly complained. When summer hits, 70 degrees. Yep, that's right. In Bombay, we're usually sweating through temps over 100 with humidity so thick it's like breathing soup. He shifts in his chair, and you notice he's unconsciously loosening up a bit. I admit, I've developed a real appreciation for English rain while being away from home. That makes you smile, a genuine smile, not one of those fake living room smiles your mom drilled into you. Rain's definitely something we have plenty of. The conversation keeps dancing carefully forward. Thomas tells you about the markets in Bombay, the weird fruits he learned to enjoy, and the headache of managing workers who speak dozens of languages. You share your much smaller adventures books you've read, music you've practiced, observations about London life. Every topic is safe, appropriate, designed to show personality without getting too personal, but you're also watching him, just like your mom advised. When Mary comes in to serve tea, you notice Thomas nod politely to her, a tiny acknowledgement many gentlemen of his class would ignore when your dad jokes about the weather. Thomas laughs not the forced, I have to be polite kind, but real amusement shining in his eyes. When Mrs. Weatherby accidentally spills her tea, hot liquid splashing all over the little table, Thomas immediately stands up to help, pulling out a clean handkerchief without being asked. Oh, I'm so clumsy. Mrs. Weatherby waves off, dabbing at the spill. Not at all. Your mom soothes, while Mary quickly appears with a cloth to clean up. This kind of thing happens all the time, but you notice something else. When the teacup hits the floor, Thomas, startled, not just a normal flinch, but something deeper. His hand twitches for a moment, and his eyes dart toward the door like he's checking for an escape route. It only lasts a few seconds before he regains his composure, but you didn't ignore that. Sudden loud noises seem to affect him way more than they should, but you completely ignored that little detail. Something about sudden loud noises seemed to rattle him more than it should. The formal part of the meeting lasted exactly 1 hour, by the book. Any shorter, and you'd look uninterested. Longer would be just plain arrogant. As the elders prepared to leave, Thomas asked for a quick word with your dad. They chatted in the hallway, just enough so no one could overhear, but everyone in the parlor could see. Through the doorway, you saw your dad nod a few times. Thomas gestured occasionally, his hand movements just as precise and careful as you'd noticed before. About 5 minutes later, they shook hands, and your dad's expression said the chat went well. Miss Hartwell, Thomas said, returning to the parlor. With your father's permission, I'd be honored to see you again. Perhaps Sunday afternoon, if you agree. Your heart did a little stumble. Well, that's that. The official courting has begun. That sounds lovely, Mr. Weatherby. Once they left, your mom immediately started her post-visit analysis. He seems quite decent, she said, sitting down, proper posture, clean nails, polite with the servants. And did you notice he helped me when I spilled the tea? Thoughtful touch. Your dad joined in. He saved a tidy sum while in India, enough to marry without any family help, and his prospects with the company look solid. But you kept thinking about the moment the teacup slipped, the way Thomas moved carefully, those slightly narrowed eyes when he talked about India's brutal climate. There are layers here that formal dating just isn't designed to reveal. Sunday came with unseasonal heat at the end of May. You were wearing your second nicest dress, pale blue cotton dotted with tiny white flowers, a color your mom said made your eyes pop. No corset crisis this time, no stressful breakfast. You were starting to get the rhythm of these visits. Thomas arrived promptly at 2, carrying a small bouquet. This was acceptable because flowers are temporary, and humble, not like jewelry or books, which scream I'm way too serious about this. Today he dressed more casually, in a brown jacket and light trousers, looking more relaxed. Miss Hartwell, he said, bowing slightly as he offered the flowers. I saw these growing in my mother's garden and thought you might like them. They're sweet peas, purple and white, delicate with the scent of spring and innocence. When you took them, your gloved fingers brushed his for a moment, and you felt a tiny electric jolt Nothing to do with static from your wool dress. You said they were lovely, burying your face in the fragrant petals to hide the blush spreading across your cheeks. Sweet peas are my favorite. He said he hoped so, and something in his voice told you this wasn't just a random choice. This visit felt different from the first. Once the initial formalities were out of the way, the conversation flowed naturally. Thomas told you about his childhood, the youngest of 4 sons, always trying to prove he deserved attention. You shared stories about your schooling, the small school you attended where you learned French, painting, and enough math to manage the family finances. I confess, Thomas said as the conversation paused, I found London quite suffocating after 4 years living in smaller communities. The noise, the crowds, the pace of everything. Sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten how to speak English properly. There was a vulnerability in that admission that surprised you. Gentlemen aren't supposed to show uncertainty or weakness. Yet here he was, admitting the homecoming wasn't as smooth as expected. Maybe you should say carefully, the problem isn't becoming a proper Englishman, but finding your own way to be, showing uncertainty or weakness. Yet here he admits the journey home wasn't as smooth as. Let's be careful here. It's not about becoming a proper Englishman, but figuring out your own quirky way to be one. 4 years is a long haul. You've lived through stuff most of us can't even imagine. He looks at you surprised, like he didn't think you'd get it. Miss Hartwell's got sharp instincts. She really does have a keen eye. In the weeks that follow, Sunday visits become a thing. Thomas shows up every Sunday at 2 p.m. and sticks to the schedule like clockwork. Sometimes you're chilling in the parlor, other times strolling the tiny garden out back. Mom or Aunt Caroline is always lurking nearby. The chats got deeper, more private, as private as Victorian manners would allow. You know Thomas sometimes had nightmares. He never said it outright, but dropped hints about why he looked so wiped out every Monday morning. You found out he wrote poetry too, though he was way too embarrassed to share any of it with you. He told you about weird Indian dishes he liked, festivals he'd seen, and the headache of juggling business ties between different cultures. Speaking of those cross-cultural business dramas, you opened up about your own frustrations, your secret dream to escape the dusty London borders and travel somewhere, anywhere else. You loved novels, but carefully avoided mentioning. On the 4th Sunday visit, Thomas dropped a bombshell that made your heart skip. Your pulse went from 0 to 60. Mr. Hartwell, he said, glancing at your mom busy sewing nearby. I wonder if you might agree to accompany me to the Crystal Palace exhibition next Saturday, under proper supervision. Of course, this is important. Attending a public event together signals a new level of flirting, a semi-official announcement that you're officially an item. Your mom's embroidery needle froze mid-stitch. She waited for your answer. I'd be delighted, you said, trying to sound calm despite your chest doing somersaults. The Crystal Palace, rebuilt in South London after the Great Exhibition of 1851, was the height of Victorian modern cool. The building itself was an iron and glass marvel, rising from Sydenham Hill like a fairy tale palace made of light and air. Inside were gardens, fountains, exhibitions from around the globe, and enough wonders to keep you busy for days. Saturday was bright and clear. You wore your finest outfit, a deep blue silk dress your mom had saved 6 months for, with a matching jacket and a tiny hat decorated with ribbons. Your gloves were pristine white kid leather, and you carried a small beaded purse holding a handkerchief, snuff, and a few coins. Thomas arrived in a hired carriage, an open one so the chaperone could keep a close eye on things while still letting you feel adventurous. Aunt Carolyn, chosen for her stern attitude and hawk eyes, sat across from you. She wore her grimmest expression and the pointiest hat you'd ever seen. Feathers aimed like a spear at anyone who dared act out of line. The trip through London was truly an adventure. The streets were jam-packed with carriages, buses, carts, and riders, all fighting for space on roads clearly not made for this kind of chaos. Street vendors hawked their goods: fresh flowers, coins, hot pies, meat pies, chimney sweeping services, and soot clearance. Thomas pointed out landmarks as you passed. The new Houses of Parliament, with their Gothic towers, Westminster Abbey's ancient stones blackened by coal smoke, bridges spanning rivers crowded with barges loaded with goods waiting to dock. The river itself was a traffic jam of steamers puffing black smoke, sailing ships with masts like a forest, and fleets of small boats and cargo moving constantly on the murky water. Heading south of the river, the neighborhood vibe changed. The big squares and fancy townhouses of central London vanished. Here, smaller, cramped homes smelled of industry and worse, vying for space on streets never meant for such crowds. Street vendors hawk their goods: fresh flowers, loose change, hot pies, meat pies, chimney sweeping, soot removal. Thomas points out landmarks as you pass by. The new Parliament building with its Gothic towers, Westminster Abbey's ancient stones blackened by coal smoke, bridges spanning rivers where barges loaded with goods wait their turn to dock. The river itself, jammed with traffic, steamships puffing black smoke, sailing ships with forests of masts and fleets of small boats and cargo constantly moving on the murky water. As you head south of the river, the character of neighborhoods changes. The grand squares and posh terraces of central London fade away. Here, houses are smaller, cramped together, and the air smells like industrial smoke mixed with something worse. The stench of too many people packed into too little space with lousy sanitation. But then you climb Sydenham Hill, and suddenly the Crystal Palace appears before you like a dream. This giant structure captures the afternoon light, reflecting it into thousands of dazzling, sparkling beams. The gardens stretch out in every direction, bursting with exotic plants and elaborate flower beds forming intricate patterns when viewed from the palace's lofty terrace. It's stunning. You take a deep breath, forgetting all about keeping that proper distance. That's right, Thomas agrees and reaches out to steady you as you step down from the carriage. Honestly, it kinda reminded me a bit of some palaces I've seen in India, Victorian faith in iron, glass, and human craftsmanship inside the palace. You're hit immediately by the sheer size and variety of everything. The nave of the church seems to stretch on forever, packed with fountains and towering exotic plants. There's an exhibit on every imaginable topic, the latest industrial machines, butterfly collections from all over the globe, displays of indigenous crafts from the far corners of the British Empire, and artworks that mix science with beauty. Thomas guides you through the crowd, always keeping your comfort in mind. When the pressure of the crowd gets too much, he leads you to quieter spots. If you pause to admire a particularly fascinating display, he waits patiently, no rush. When Aunt Caroline declares she needs a break, he immediately finds a tea room where she can rest. During the break, while Aunt Caroline sips tea and nibbles on a scone, Thomas leans in just enough to whisper, so only you hear, "Miss Hartwell, I hope you don't think I'm full of myself, but I'm finding myself looking forward more and more to these Saturday outings and to your company." Your heart stops, then races twice as fast. This is edging pretty close to a serious declaration. You glance quickly at Aunt Caroline, but she's busy, demolishing a currant pastry. "I like them too." You whisper back, barely audible, "I have been hoping." He starts, then pauses. "I wonder if you might consider, though maybe this isn't the right place for such discussions." You get it. He's feeling things out. Approaching the topic of commitment without coming right out and asking, by all rules. These talks should first happen with your father, then with you, and definitely not in a public tea room with your aunt less than a meter away. Perhaps, you say carefully, such discussions should take place somewhere more private. Your eyes sparkle with enough energy to light up the palace's new gas lamps. Understands you're not rejecting his offer, just suggesting proper protocol, relief, and a deeper feeling wash over his face, along with a flicker of anticipation and affection. The rest of the afternoon passes in joy and happiness. You admire tropical birds with shimmering, impossible to name colors. You watch demonstrations of new photography tech that snaps a person in minutes instead of hours. You even get to sample exotic fruits that taste like far-off lands you might never set foot in. But beneath all the wonder and excitement, a deeper connection is brewing between you and Thomas. A feeling that change is coming, that decisions made now will reshape your entire future as you head home under the smoky London sunset. You know everything's about to change. Tuesday night brings a storm that rattles the windows and pelts the glass with sheets of rain. You're in the parlor, stitching with your mother by lamplight when the doorbell rings. It's past 8 p. It's way too late for polite calls. So when Mary appears at the door flustered, you know something serious is up. "Sorry, madam," Mary tells your mother, "but Mr. Thomas Weatherby is outside. He says he urgently needs to speak with the master." Your mother's eyebrows shoot up near her hairline. Your father steps out of his study, newspapers still in hand, looking just as confused. Through the parlor window, you see Thomas's hired carriage waiting in the rain, the horse stomping impatiently as water drips from its mane. Show him into the study, your father says after a moment's thought. Elena, you and your mother stay here, but of course, you try to catch every sound from down the hall, men's hushed voices, serious and low, the noise, indeed, your dad's occasional comments, and Thomas's long-winded answers you can barely catch. The conversation drags on for almost 20 minutes, endless and torturous, as you sit there with the forgotten embroidery frame on your lap, your heart pounding so hard it makes the jeweled brooch on your collar tremble. Finally, footsteps approach the parlor. Your dad walks in alone, but his face spills the beans before he even speaks. Elena, he says, with a mix of satisfaction and maybe a hint of relief in his voice. Mr. Weatherby has asked to give you his address. I said yes. The embroidery frame slips from your trembling fingers and thuds softly to the floor. That's it. Thomas wants to marry you after 6 weeks of careful getting to know each other. He's ready to make it official. He wants to talk to you tomorrow afternoon. Your dad continues. I told him to call at 2 o'clock. Your mom will be there, but he's allowed to propose directly to you. Your mom lets out a tiny squeal of excitement, but quickly tries to keep it under control. Oh, Elenina, we need to decide what you'll wear and maybe ask cook to prepare something special, and perhaps we should move the nice china set from the cupboard for your mom. You gently interrupt, though you're just as nervous, your hands slightly shaky. Maybe we should hear what he has to say first, but you already know what Thomas will say. It's not about whether he'll propose, but whether you're really ready to say yes. Marriage in 1855 isn't. Like jumping into a relationship you can bail on if things go south. Once you say yes, your legal existence basically disappears. Your property becomes his property. Your money becomes his money. Even your children, if you have any, legally belong to him, not you. But do you really have a choice? At 22, you're almost at the age where people start whispering. You're past your prime. Your family can't afford to support you forever. And Thomas seems kind, smart, and genuinely fond of you. In a world where many marriages were just business deals, the idea of actual feelings was like hitting the jackpot. Wednesday drags on painfully slow. You change outfits 3 times before settling on a soft gray wool dress trimmed with purple, serious enough to show you get the importance of the occasion, but pretty enough to remind Thomas why he wanted to propose in the first place. Your hair refuses to cooperate, and Mary has to pin and repin your complicated braid twice before it stays put. Exactly at 2 o'clock, Thomas arrives, holding a small velvet box that makes your stomach do flips. He's wearing his finest black coat and a crisp white shirt with a stiff collar that looks like it could choke him if he turns his head the wrong way. His hands tremble slightly as he takes off his gloves. Miss Hartwell, he says formally, but with warm eyes. Miss Hartwell, Hartwell. He nods toward your mom, who's sitting in the corner chair with her sewing, close enough to supervise but far enough to give some privacy. She sits on the edge of the chair, back straight, hands on her lap. Thomas sits opposite her, still the same setup as the first meetings. But now everything feels different. The emotional finale. Miss Hartwell, Thomas begins, then pauses and takes a deep breath. Elenina, with your permission, I've spoken with your father and with yours. Want to speak directly to your heart. This is the moment everything changes. You nod, unable to believe your own voice. Those past weeks, knowing you has been one of the happiest times of my life. He continues. His voice grows more confident. Your intelligence, your kindness, your strength of character, all these qualities made him realize he can't imagine a future without you. He slides off the chair, dropping to one knee beside the table, the velvet box now proudly displayed in his hand. Elenina Hartwell, may I have the great honor of making you my wife. The ring inside the box is modest but stunning. A small diamond surrounded by your confidence is growing, your smarts, your kindness, the strength of your character. All of these make him realize he can't even imagine a future without you. He slid off the chair, dropped to one knee beside the table set, the little velvet box now proudly displayed in his hand. Elenina Hartwell, will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? The ring inside was modest but stunning, a small diamond hugged by tiny pearl-like beads of gold. Nothing flashy or loud, but clearly chosen with care, and a serious splurge for a guy like Thomas. Yes, you whisper. Then out loud, yes, Thomas. I would be honored to say yes. His relief was so obvious, you almost laughed. He took your left hand the first time you'd touched him, glove-free, and slid the ring onto your ring finger. His hand was warm and a bit rough, and you could feel the reality sinking in. She was wiping her eyes with a handkerchief while trying to look busy embroidering. The rest of the visit was a chaotic mess of practical talks. The engagement announcement would be in next Sunday's paper. The wedding was set for 6 months later, giving you time to plan a ceremony and Thomas time to find a decent place to live. He'd found a small 3-bedroom in Kensington, a decent kitchen, and a tiny garden, available to rent come fall. I know it's not grand, Thomas said, sounding a bit apologetic, but it's fine, and close enough to my office to walk when the weather's good. Sounds perfect, you assured him, because honestly, it did. The idea of having your own place, your own space to set up however you wanted, felt like the ultimate luxury after Thomas left. Your mom immediately started what she called engagement planning. Lists appeared overnight. What to buy, what to sew, who needs telling. The next few months would be a whirlwind of prep, unlike anything you'd ever experienced. But first, the immediate changes that come with being officially engaged. Starting next Sunday, Thomas was allowed to take you out for walks on his own. You two going out without your mom trailing behind felt like the boldest thing ever. You strolled slowly through the little park near your place, Your hand rested lightly on Thomas's arm, surprised at this newfound freedom for the first time during your courtship. You could talk without carefully weighing every word under your parents' watchful eyes. I have to admit, Thomas said as you paused by a fountain where kids played with toy boats. I've been scared for weeks you'd say no. Really, you asked? Surprised? But surely you knew I liked your visits. Liked them? Yeah, but liking and being ready to marry are two totally different things. He adjusted his cane, knowing he wasn't exactly the most exciting catch. No title, no riches, plus some baggage from his time abroad. You thought about the moments big noises startled him, how he sometimes held himself like he was bracing for pain. Everyone's got their stuff. Thomas, the question is whether you can face it together. He stopped and looked at you with a face you couldn't quite read. You're pretty wise for your age. I'm not that young. You shot back. 22 is pretty grown up, of course. He said quickly, I didn't mean that. Sometimes I feel way older than 26. India has a way of aging you. In the weeks that followed, these solo walks became precious, escaping the stiff formality of client meetings. Thomas started opening up more. He told you about the near-fatal fever he had in his second year in Bombay, about the colleague who tricked him into a promotion, and the intense relief when the ship finally took him home. In return, you shared your own secrets, your fear you wouldn't be a good enough mom, your frustration with the limits placed on women's education, and your secret dream of learning to paint properly, not just the watered-down, female-appropriate kind. Maybe, Thomas suggested one afternoon as you lounged watching sparrows hop around your feet. Your mom trailing behind felt like the boldest thing you'd ever done. So you slowly walked through the little park near the house. Your hand rested lightly on Thomas's arm, surprised by this new freedom. For the first time in all this getting to know you phase, you could actually speak without carefully weighing every word under your parents' watchful eyes. I admit it, Thomas said as you stopped by that fountain where kids played with toy boats. I've been scared for weeks you might say no to me. Really, you asked? Surprised? But surely you know I enjoy your visits. Enjoy them, yes. But liking something and being ready to marry are two totally different things. He adjusted his cane grip, knowing he wasn't exactly the most exciting prospect. No title, no fortune, and some baggage from his time abroad. You thought about the moments when loud noises startled him, how he sometimes carefully held himself, as if bracing for pain. People have their complications, Thomas. What matters is whether two people can face them together. He stopped walking and looked at you with a face you couldn't quite read. You're wise beyond your years. I'm not that young, you protested. 22 is pretty mature, of course, he said quickly. I didn't mean that. Sometimes I feel much older than 26. India ages you fast. In the weeks that followed, these free walks became precious to both of you, escaping the formal constraints of client meetings. Thomas started opening up more. He told you about the fever that almost killed him in his second year in Bombay, about the colleague who conned him into a promotion, about the overwhelming relief when the ship finally set sail to take him home. In return, you shared your own secrets, fears, that you weren't cut out to be a good mother, your frustration at the limits placed on women's education, your secret wish to learn real painting, not just the watercolor doodles deemed appropriate for women. Maybe, Thomas suggested one afternoon as you sat on the couch watching sparrows hop at your feet, you could learn proper painting after we're married. We won't be rich, but we'll be comfortable enough for little pleasures. He said it casually, but the idea of life after marriage made you nervous. It was becoming real, the future you planned together, with walks and new little privileges. Thomas was now allowed to visit you in the front parlor without official supervision, though he still had to be home before dark. During these visits, you were allowed to hold hands, a simple intimacy, but it felt like a whole new world after so many layers of smooth leather covers carved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. It's beautiful. Thomas, thank you. He also had a journal. Before dark, during these visits, you're allowed to hold hands, a casual kind of intimacy that feels totally different after months of careful distance. The first time Thomas holds your hand, you're sitting on the couch, looking at a picture book he brought to show you scenes from India. His fingers weave into yours, warm and a bit rough, and you're surprised how natural it feels. Is this really okay, you ask, though you don't pull your hand away. Absolutely proper for an engaged couple, he assures you, though I admit it feels a bit rude after all these weeks of keeping my hands to myself. You laugh, and that sound seems to surprise both of you. It's been ages since you've laughed so freely with Thomas. Most of your interactions have been cautious, restrained, but this connection brings a new kind of comfort to your relationship. Letters start arriving the very week you get engaged. Victorian tradition expected soon-to-be married couples to write often, especially if work or family duty kept them apart. Thomas's job means he has to spend a week at the company office in Manchester. Suddenly, you learn how to pour your feelings onto paper. My dearest Elena. His first letter begins, I've only been gone 2 days, yet I find myself missing our conversations more than I expected. Manchester is a noisy, smoky, industrial city, but he confesses he'd trade all its hustle and bustle for one quiet walk through the park near your home. You spend the whole evening drafting your reply, filling more than 3 pages with your careful handwriting. You tell him about the books you're reading, the changes your mother is making to the house for the wedding. Everyday little details suddenly seem meaningful when shared with someone who cares. These letters become the foundation of your growing bond. Thomas writes with more passion than in person, freed from the stiff formalities of polite conversation. He writes about his hopes for your marriage, plans for the Kensington house, and his gradual adjustment to life in England after years abroad. You realize you're freer to express yourself in writing, too. You tell him about your fears and hopes, your questions about what married life will really be like, and your excitement about having a home of your own. Gift exchanges get serious, too. Besides the engagement ring, Thomas gives you a small photo locket a formal portrait of him wearing his best coat, looking serious and a bit younger than he is. You respond with a studio photo of yourself in your finest dress and calmest expression. But the most intimate gift is yet to come. One rainy, windy Thursday afternoon in July, Thomas shows up at your door holding a carefully wrapped small package. "This is a bit unusual," he says, looking a little embarrassed as he hands it to you. "But I thought you might like it." Inside is a leather-bound journal, blank pages waiting, but the special part is the carefully written inscription on the first page. From Thomas, asking Elena to record all those precious thoughts, too valuable for casual conversation. You run your fingers over the smooth leather cover, carved with the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's beautiful. Thomas, thank you. I have one just like it." He admits, "I thought maybe we should both keep journals during our engagement, not necessarily to share, but to help us think through all the changes ahead." That night, alone in your bedroom, you write the first lines in your new journal. You write about the strange mix of excitement and fear as marriage approaches, about your growing feelings for Thomas, and the overwhelming nature of all the decisions. Just like this one, he admitted, "I thought maybe we should both keep diaries during our engagement, not to share, necessarily, but to help us think through all the upcoming changes." That night, alone in your bedroom, you wrote the first lines in your new journal. You wrote about the strange mix of excitement and fear as marriage approached, about your growing feelings for Thomas, about the overwhelming nature of all the decisions ahead. Gotta get it done. Summer slipped by in a blur of prepping and daydreaming. Mom dragged me along to try on wedding dresses and new outfits that'll fill my bridal closet. The dress was made of white silk and Brussels lace, pricier than any designer stuff Dad could afford. He earned that in 2 months, but the dress was considered essential to keep the family's social standing. I spent the afternoon learning household management skills, stuff I was barely scratching the surface of. The cook showed me how to plan meals and manage the food budget. Mary taught me how to properly care for linen and the best tricks to get out all kinds of stains. Mom drilled me on social duties once I'm married, which neighbors to visit, how to manage servants, how to throw a proper dinner party. But maybe the biggest lessons came from the married women in the family and my social circle. Aunt Margaret, married 15 years, pulled me aside for a chat no one else wanted to hear. She laid it out straight. Marriage isn't like the novels. Sure, there'll be great moments, but also some real rough patches. My husband would have moods I just wouldn't get. I'd have days wondering what on earth I'd gotten myself into. The key is remembering that building a life together takes time and patience. She paused and studied my face. And Elena, there are parts of married life no one talks about directly, but you need to understand them. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, but I tried to listen as Aunt Margaret carefully hinted at what's expected of me as a wife. It wasn't the romantic picture painted by the poems I'd read, but the real deal I desperately needed to know. as summer shifted to fall. My wedding day was speeding closer. The Kensington house was put on deposit, and Thomas took me to see it on a chilly September afternoon, smaller than my family's place, but bright and cheerful, with big windows flooding in light and a garden just big enough for a little veggie patch. Thomas pointed out the modern kitchen, opened cupboards to show off built-in storage, and there was a proper stove, not some half-hearted setup. I ran my hand over the wooden countertop, imagining myself cooking there, managing my own household, nervous and excited all at once. "It's perfect," I told him, and I really meant it. This would be my domain, my responsibility, my home. 2 weeks before the wedding, Thomas made an unusual request. He asked if I wanted to cut a lock of hair for him to keep, a keepsake always by his side. It was a common custom among engaged couples, but still felt incredibly intimate. I sat before my dressing table while Mary carefully snipped a small lock behind my ear, where no one could see. The soft, dark strands felt alive in my palm as I wrapped them in silk paper for Thomas. I told Mary, as I sealed the package, a piece of me to carry with him. In return, Thomas gave me a lock of his hair, preserved in a tiny silver locket. "Something of mine for you to keep close to your heart," he said simply. The week before the wedding, I dove into the final prep whirlwind. Relatives flooded my house like a friendly invasion. My wedding dress hung in the wardrobe like a beautiful ghost of my future self. My trousseau, the clothes, linens, and household goods I'd bring to the marriage, all piled into 2 big trunks at the foot of my bed. Now Thomas called every day, sometimes twice, just to check in and simply to hear my voice. The awkward social distance of early dating gave way to genuine affection and comfortable companionship. I found myself looking forward to married life, not just as a given milestone, but as an adventure I wanted to share with this special man. On the Thursday before my Saturday wedding, Thomas took my hand in the parlor and looked at me seriously. "Elena," he said, "I want you to know that no matter what challenges we face as husband and wife, I will always try to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me, and I will try to be worthy of you," I replied. Every word is sincere. Outside, London buzzed with its usual daily energy, the clatter of horse-drawn carriages, street vendors screaming, the constant noise of a city that never sleeps. Everything froze, but right now, in my living room, holding Thomas's hand, the future suddenly felt both certain and full of amazing possibilities. Saturday morning, gloomy and drizzly classic London weather that turns everything into a sad watercolor painting left out in the rain. I woke up before dawn in my childhood bedroom for the last time, listening to the familiar sounds of the house coming alive around me. The head chef was banging pots and pans in the 3-story kitchen below, and I could hear my dad's heavy footsteps pacing the library, probably rehearsing a speech for the wedding. My wedding dress hung on the closet door like a glowing ghost. The silk and white lace caught the faint light filtering through the rain-streaked windows. In a few hours, I'd be wearing it and officially become Mrs. Thomas Weatherby, trading in my name, Eleanor Hartwell, for a whole new life. Mary appeared with my breakfast tray, but the usual porridge was swapped out for thin toast and weak tea. Mom had finally given in to the idea that my stressed-out stomach wouldn't handle anything heavier. My hand trembled slightly as I lifted the teacup, and I noticed Mary looking at me with a mix of excitement and sympathy. "Feeling nervous, madam?" she asked softly as she began laying out my lingerie. "Scared," I admitted, instantly feeling guilty because young ladies usually greet marriage with joy and anticipation, not sheer terror, but Mary just nodded knowingly. "That's natural, madam. My sister said the same thing on her wedding morning. She said it felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing what's at the bottom." That comparison didn't exactly comfort me, but it was reassuring to know other women had felt this mix of excitement and panic too. Mom hurried in right after breakfast, dressed in her finest dark purple silk dress, a color that screamed mother of the bride, but still kept the proper calm. Behind her came Aunt Caroline, your cousin Margaret, and Mrs. Patterson from next door, all armed with pins, ribbons, and very strong opinions about how you should do your hair. Getting dressed took nearly 3 hours. First, a thin cotton dress, light and comfy, like wearing nothing at all. Then came the corset, cinched, tighter than usual to create the perfect curve for the wedding gown. Today, Mary pulled so tight I could barely breathe, but I didn't complain. On your wedding day, discomfort is the price of beauty. Next was the skirt, puffier than your everyday dress, designed to hold up the massive train. Then 3 crinolines, each adding more volume and weight until you felt like you were wearing a tiny tent. When the dress finally slipped over my head, I was exhausted from moving around so much to wrangle all these layers. But when Mary fastened the last pearl button and stepped back, the reflection in the mirror took my breath away. The woman staring back was elegant, refined, and beautiful in a way my everyday self never could be. That wedding dress turned me into someone worthy of a proper Victorian wedding. My hair was done up with painstaking care, white silk flowers woven between braids and curls. A delicate Brussels lace veil borrowed from your grandmother's gown fell from a tiny sparkling tiara. The only jewelry I wore was Thomas's engagement ring and a simple pearl necklace from my mom. "You look like an angel," Mom whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks as she tried to hold them back. The carriage ride to St. George's Church felt both endlessly long and painfully short. Dad sat beside me, unusually quiet, occasionally patting my gloved hand. Through the rain-speckled windows, watched bustling London on a Saturday. Street vendors shouted their wares. Kids dodged puddles. Life went on as usual, even though a wedding straight out of Victorian rulebook. Your hair's all fancy with white silk flowers woven through, braids and curls. a delicate Brussels lace veil, borrowed from your friend's wedding dress, draped down. From a tiny sparkling crown, your only jewelry Thomas's engagement ring, and your mom's simple pearl necklace. You look like an angel, your mom whispered, tears sneaking down her cheeks. She was trying hard to hold back. The carriage ride to St. George's Church felt both endless and way too short. Dad sat beside you, unusually quiet, occasionally giving your gloved hand a gentle squeeze. Through rain-speckled windows, you watched bustling Saturday London, street vendors still shouting, kids dodging puddles, life carrying on like nothing was about to change. Even though your whole world was about to flip. The church appeared, its stone facade yellowed by years of coal smoke, but still impressively Gothic and grand. Carriages lined up outside, and you could spot wedding guests rushing in. People dodge puddles, kids avoid splashing, and life chugs on as usual, even though your whole world is about to flip upside down. The church looms ahead, its stone facade stained yellow from years of coal smoke. But it still hits you with that majestic Gothic vibe. Carriages line up outside, and you spot wedding guests rushing in like they're late. Under the rain, umbrellas turn into a sea of black silk. The priest helps you out of the carriage, careful not to step on your dress train. Suddenly, you're standing in the church foyer, rain pattering on the roof above, the smell of wet wool and old stone filling your nose. Through the heavy oak door, you heard guests whispering as they settled in. "Ready, my dear?" Dad asked, reaching out his hand. You nodded, barely recognizing your own voice, and the door swung open. The church was packed, more people than you expected, faces both familiar and strange, staring at you with that weird mix of curiosity and warm wedding vibes. The flickering candles fought the gray morning light, casting playful shadows on stone walls. The organist started the procession, and suddenly you were stepping down the aisle, hand in hand with your dad, your dress trailing like autumn leaves. But all you could see was Thomas, standing at the altar in his sharpest black coat, hands clasped behind his back. When your eyes met, he smiled, not the formal, polite smile. You were used to this, but it was warmer, more personal, like saying, "This isn't some show or social duty, it's the real deal." The ceremony unfolded in a haze of ancient words and rituals. You heard yourself promise to love, honor, obey, stick with Thomas, forsaking all others, until death did you part. The weight of those vows felt like a heavy cloak on your shoulders. But when Thomas slid his mother's gold wedding ring onto your finger, his hands steady and warm, the pastor declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." And just like that, it was official. You were married. Now, legally, socially, and in every important Victorian way. You belonged to Thomas. Thomas's kiss was brief and innocent, church appropriate with all those witnesses around. But you felt the promise of more intimate moments in the gentle pressure of his lips on yours as you turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Weatherbeby. The world looked a little different than it had an hour ago. The wedding breakfast was at your newly spruced up home. The table groaned under a feast, honey-glazed roast ham, fresh warm bread straight from the oven, jellies and custard tarts, plus a 3-tier cake decorated with sugar flowers, so lifelike you could almost smell it. But you barely managed to eat, squeezed into a tight corset and buzzing with tension all morning. You took a tiny sip of champagne, a rare luxury that made your head feel light and floaty, and smiled so hard your cheeks ached as guests offered congratulations and advice. Uncle William, a bit flushed from his own champagne, insisted on an impromptu speech about the sacredness of marriage and a wife's duties. Aunt Margaret shared tales from her early married days, mostly about family disasters and misunderstandings that seem funny now but probably weren't back then. Thomas stayed close the whole time, occasionally touching your hand or whispering reassurances when socializing got overwhelming. You noticed how he dodged deeper questions about the honeymoon and future plans, guarding your privacy even amidst the celebration. As afternoon faded and guests began to drift away, the reality of what came next started to sink in. Tonight, you'd sleep in your new home as Thomas's wife. The intimate gestures Aunt Margaret hinted at in her detailed chats would become real. The abstract idea of marriage would turn into everyday life with a man you'd only met a few months ago. By 5 p.m., the last guest departed, leaving the house looking like a party battlefield. Smelling nice, but eating was nearly impossible with a tight corset squeezing you and the buzzing tension from morning still clinging on. You took a sip of champagne, a rare luxury that lightened your head and floated you away, smiling so hard your cheeks hurt as guests congratulated you and dished out advice. Uncle William, a bit tipsy from the champagne, insisted on giving an impromptu speech about the sacredness of marriage and a wife's duties. Aunt Margaret shared stories from her early married days. Most were about family disasters and misunderstandings that looked funny in hindsight, but probably weren't at the time. Thomas stayed by your side the whole party, occasionally touching your hand or whispering comforting words when social duties felt overwhelming. You noticed how he brushed off deeper questions about the honeymoon and future plans, fiercely guarding your privacy even in the middle of the celebration. As the afternoon wore on and guests started to drift away, reality of what came next began to sink in. Tonight, you'd sleep in your new home as Thomas's wife. The intimate gestures Aunt Margaret hinted at in her detailed chats would become real. The abstract idea of marriage would turn into everyday married life with a man you'd only met a few months ago. By 5 p.m., the last guests had left, leaving the house looking like a party battlefield. Empty glasses, crumpled napkins, chairs kicked askew. Your mom bossed the servants around to clean up, but her eyes stayed on you, pride mixed with a bit of worry. "Time to change into your travel dress," she said softly, and suddenly your throat tightened with tears that hadn't fallen yet. The travel dress was a dark green wool, practical, paired with a matching coat designed for the carriage ride tours. Your new home and fresh start. When Mary untied your wedding dress for the last time, you felt like you were Your travel dress is a deep green wool number, super practical, paired with a matching jacket designed for the horse-drawn carriage ride too. Your new home and fresh start. When Mary unties your wedding dress for the last time, you feel like you're shedding one identity and stepping into another. Your dad loads the luggage onto Thomas's hired carriage while your mom fusses over the last details. Did you bring gloves, a purse, or that tiny bag with your essentials for tonight? Every little question carries meanings you aren't quite ready to face. Goodbyes hit harder than you expected. Your parents stand on the doorstep. Mom's sobbing her eyes out. Dad's trying to stay dignified but failing miserably. This house has been your whole world for 22 years, and now you're leaving it forever. Write to us soon. Mom calls as the carriage rolls away. And remember what I told you about being a good wife. Thomas squeezes your hand as the streets of your childhood fade behind you. You okay? He asks gently. I think so, you say. Though you're not totally sure, everything's just different now. Yeah, he agrees. But sometimes different is good, right? The Kensington house looks smaller than you remember, but it feels welcoming when you step inside. Late afternoon light, smoke curling from the chimney. Davies, the housekeeper Thomas hired, is ready to greet you. The front garden is meticulously cared for, with late blooming roses fragrant despite the recent rain. Thomas helps you down from the carriage, and you notice he's careful to steady you on the steps, like you might topple over. The front door opens before you even reach it, revealing Mrs. Davies, a comfy-looking woman in her 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. Welcome home, Mrs. Weatherby. She says a name that still sounds strange. Now you're Mrs. Weatherby, Elelena Hartwell, is gone. The house has been carefully prepared for your arrival. Fresh flowers in the front parlor, a crackling fire in the hearth, and the smell of something delicious wafting from the kitchen. Mrs. Davies guides you through the rooms you'll now manage, explaining the chores she's set up and asking about your preferences for meals and daily schedules. Your bedroom, yours and Thomas's, now overlooks the small back garden. The bed is bigger than in your childhood room, with crisp white linens, looking neat and inviting. Your luggage has been delivered and sits ready to be unpacked, stuffed with the trinkets you spent months gathering. Thomas lingers at the doorway, suddenly seeming as nervous as you are. I'll let you tell yourself, Mrs. Davies prepared dinner for 7 if you feel like it. After he leaves, you sink into the small window seat and finally allow yourself to feel the full weight of today. You're married. You're in your own house. Tonight, you'll share a bed with a man who was basically a stranger 6 months ago. Mrs. Davies appears with a tea tray and offers to help unpack, but you crave a few minutes alone to process everything that's happened. She seems to understand, bustling away with promises to call you when dinner's ready. Dinner is served in the cozy dining room by candlelight. Just you and Thomas at opposite ends of the table, both intimate and formal. Mrs. Davies has prepared roast chicken with garden vegetables, and everything tastes great, even though you're not really hungry. Thomas talks about the plans he's made for the first week of marriage. No visitors, no social obligations, just time for you two to get used to living together. He's taken time off work, an unusual move that shows he's serious about this new chapter. He suggests, alongside the custard dessert, maybe tomorrow we can organize the books in the library, and maybe you want to check out the kitchen to plan meals with Mrs. Davies. These everyday details, lying there, waiting to be unpacked, piled high with trinkets you'd spent months collecting. Thomas loitered by the doorway, suddenly looking just as nervous as you. I'll let you tell yourself, Mrs. Davies had dinner ready at 7 if that makes you feel better. After he left, you sank into the small chair by the window and finally let yourself feel the full weight of the day. You're married. You're in your own house tonight. You'll share a bed with a man who, 6 months ago, was basically a stranger. Mrs. Davies showed up with a tea tray and offered to help unpack, but you just craved a few private moments to process everything. She seemed to get it, bustling with promises to call you when dinner's ready. Dinner's served in the cozy little dining room downstairs by candlelight. Just you and Thomas at opposite ends of the table, intimate, yet somehow formal. Mrs. Davies whipped up roast chicken with garden veggies, and everything's great, even though your appetite is still playing hard to get. Thomas fills you in on the plans he's made for the first week of marriage. No guests, no social obligations, just time for you both to get used to living together. He took time off work, a pretty bold move, showing he's serious about this whole life change. He suggests, alongside the custard dessert, maybe tomorrow we can organize the books in the library, and maybe you want to check out the kitchen to chat with Mrs. Davies about meal planning. These little day-to-day details are overwhelming and reassuring all at once. This is what marriage really looks like, none of the romance from novels or wedding drama. Just the daily grind of sharing life with someone else. After dinner, you two sit together in the living room, Thomas reading the evening paper out loud while you try to focus on your embroidery, but both overwhelming and oddly comforting. This is marriage, real life, not the romance novels or dramatic wedding scenes, just the daily grind of sharing your life with someone else. After dinner, you sit together in the parlor. Thomas reads the evening paper aloud while you try to focus on your embroidery, but the calm family vibe is fragile, held together by your uneasy awareness of what tomorrow might bring when you hit the sack. At 9 p.m., Mrs. Davies shows up to stoke the fire and get the house cozy for the night. She wishes you good night with a look so loaded it makes your cheeks burn. At 9 p.m., Mrs. Davies shows up to light the fire and get the house ready for the night. She wishes you both good night with a look so loaded it makes your cheeks burn. Suddenly, you realize it's just you and your husband alone in the new house. Galena, Thomas whispers, setting his newspaper aside. He wants you to know he gets it. All of this is new to you. We don't have to rush anything. No pressure to move fast. His concern hits you right in the feels, even if it highlights just how weird your situation is. You both get each other enough to feel the genuine affection, but not quite enough to navigate physical intimacy. Without tripping over awkwardness, "Thank you," you whisper. That means a lot. When you finally head upstairs, Thomas points out the tiny dressing room where he'll change into pajamas, giving you your own private space to get ready for bed. Alone in the bedroom, you swap your travel dress for a fancy cotton nightgown that used to be part of a set. Then you sit at the vanity to brush your hair. In the mirror, you see yourself going through this nightly ritual. In a brand new setting, the woman staring back is the same as always, but everything around her has changed. This is your room now, your mirror, your bed, your life. When Thomas returns in cotton pajamas and a bathrobe, you're sitting on the edge of the bed, feeling shy and unsure. He moves carefully, respectfully, and sits on the other side, keeping a respectful distance. "Elena," he whispers, "I mean it. We've got a lifetime to figure this out." You look at him by the soft candlelight beside the bed. His hair's a little messy, his face serious but gentle. This is your husband. This patient, kind man is yours now. And you're his, I know. You say, grateful for his patience. He reaches across the gap between you and takes your hand. The same revolutionary gesture during your engagement now feels way more meaningful. "We'll be okay, right?" he asks, and you catch the insecurity hiding behind his confidence. "Yeah," you say, realizing you actually believe it. "We'll be okay." The early days of marriage blur by in a haze of settling into family life and tiny discoveries. As you learn Thomas likes his coffee strong, that he mumbles in his sleep while shaving, and sometimes talks nonsense. Usually, numbers and dates from his work ledger. He finds out you're not a morning person, that you have strong opinions about how to organize books, and that you arrange the prettiest flower bouquets he's ever seen. Mrs. Davies proves incredibly helpful in setting you up as the lady of the house. She teaches you how to plan balanced meals on a budget, manage household finances, oversee cleaning schedules, and maintenance. Running a small household is more complicated than you thought, but incredibly satisfying in ways you never expected. You write your first letter as a married woman to your parents, describing the new house and settling into life. The signature, your daughter, Elena Weatherby, feels strange on the page but gets less odd each time you write it. Thomas goes back to work after a week, leaving you alone in the house with Mrs. Davies and your own thoughts. The loneliness feels both freeing and a bit overwhelming. For the first time ever, you're responsible for organizing your days without parents, teachers, or social obligations guiding you. You spend the morning rearranging the living room to catch more sunlight from the windows. After lunch, you walk to nearby shops to introduce yourself to the local merchants as Mrs. Weatherby of Elm Street. The baker, grocer, fishmonger all treat you with the respect reserved for a respectable married woman, and you start to get a feel for the social weight that comes with your new status. When Thomas returns that evening, you've cooked dinner yourself, a simple meal, but made by your own hands in your own kitchen. The pride on his face when you tell him makes it all worth it. He says you're turning into a real housewife, and honestly, there's a hint of admiration in his voice that makes your heart skip a beat. I'm learning. You reply, Miss Davies is a patient teacher. Weeks pass, and you slowly settle into the married life rhythm. Thomas heads to the office every morning after breakfast, coming back in the evening with stories about coworkers and the challenges of adjusting the British business after years abroad. You fill your days with the letters from the housekeeper, family and friends, plus the social obligations that naturally stack up once you become a married woman. The physical closeness, which seemed overwhelming on your wedding night, gradually turns into something natural as you both get more comfortable. Thomas is patient and gentle, and you discover those mysterious marriage bits nobody talks about aren't nearly as scary as you thought. Your first dinner party as a couple happened 6 weeks after the wedding. 3 other couples in the neighborhood, carefully chosen for respect and social harmony. You spend days planning the menu with Mrs. Davies, polishing the fancy silverware and filling the house with flowers. The evening goes smoothly. Conversation flows. The food gets praised, and you score plenty of compliments on your hosting skills. After the guests leave, you and Thomas lounge in the parlor, proud of your successful social debut. You two were amazing tonight, Thomas says, loosening his collar after hours of polite formality. I'm proud to see you handle everything with such grace. Are you still riding high on the success of that night? Absolutely. You're going to be a fantastic addition to Kensington society as fall slips into winter. You realize you've nailed the transition from daughter to wife, from girl to woman. The fears that felt so huge on your wedding morning have mostly faded, replaced by a comfortable, normal family life. Sometimes you still miss home, and sometimes the weight of managing the household feels overwhelming. But you also discover unexpected joys, the satisfaction of creating a home that truly reflects your tastes, the thrill of having time for hobbies like painting and music without your parents watching over you, the growing affection between you and Thomas as you navigate daily life together. One snowy December evening, while you sit stitching by the fire and Thomas reads the paper, you realize your life has completely changed in just a few months. The anxious girl waiting in your parents' parlor for Thomas Weatherby's first visit seems like a totally different person. Thomas, you whisper, setting your sewing aside. He looks up from the paper, the light catching golden sparks in his brown eyes. I just wanted to say, I'm happy, really happy. His smile spreads slowly across his face, turning his serious expression into something warm and boyish. Me too, my dear. Me too. Outside, London is buried in thick snow, but inside your little Kensington home, you've built something precious, a life. That's completely your own. Spring arrives early in 1856, bringing a gentle warmth that makes London's soot-covered buildings look almost beautiful. You're out in the garden, kneeling among blooming daffodils, dirt under your nails, and sunshine warming your shoulders through your cotton dress. This is freedom you never had as an unmarried woman, the simple joy of working your own patch of earth. Thomas spots you there when he comes home from work, looking more amused than surprised by your disheveled appearance. Looks like you wrestled the dirt and won, he says, then sits beside you on the small wooden bench he built last month. The roses need pruning, and Mrs. Davies says the vegetable patch needs tending. You explain while wiping your hands on an old apron you started wearing for gardening. Realizes he kind of likes it. This is one of those unexpected marriage perks, the freedom to develop hobbies that were once considered totally inappropriate for an unmarried woman. Your painting skills have improved leaps and bounds now that you can hire a proper teacher instead of relying on the half-hearted lessons deemed suitable for young ladies. I started sneaking those banned novels from my parents' house and chatting about them with Thomas over dinner like we were some intellectual power couple. Guess what? Thomas said, leaning back with that smug I bring good news home look. Peterson's retiring this year, and Thomas might snag his spot. Translation, a nice juicy pay bump. His heart was racing like he just found out he won the lottery. Peterson's job means Thomas would become a senior secretary with real responsibilities and a shot at climbing up. More importantly, it meant financial security to start thinking about growing your little family. Thomas, that's fantastic. Think you'll make it. The manager seemed cautiously optimistic, but not ready to pop the champagne. He said my experience in India gave me a leg up on the competition. That dinner, you two dreamed about what Peterson's spot could mean. A bigger house, maybe with enough room for those kids you both wanted, possibly hiring a maid for Mrs. Davies, or even your own little carriage, instead of renting one for longer trips. But you'd also learned to appreciate what you had, the cozy little house where every room held memories you built together, the pride in running your own little family kingdom. Thomas's face lit up coming home to you, waiting with stories about his big day. Your first anniversary was coming up that fall, and you were amazed at how much life had changed. The nervous bride, nearly suffocating in her corset, had become a confident, self-reliant woman, skilled at managing the household, keeping up social ties, and handling the physical and mental gymnastics of marriage with ease. The anniversary celebration was perfect dinner at home with the finest china and fresh flowers from the garden, followed by a comedy show that had you both laughing till your sides hurt. Then a stroll home under gaslit streets, hand in hand with Thomas, and you realized somewhere along the way love had grown from that polite, I like you fiancé phase into something deeper and ways more solid. Ever think about how we first met, you asked, stopping under a street lamp, watching golden autumn leaves glow? Thomas admitted, I thought you looked terrifying that first afternoon. I was afraid you'd faint. I was scared too. She laughed. I'd never talked to a non-relative man without my mom hovering a meter away. But there you were, asking about my reading and actually listening. You were the first woman who treated me like a person, not a future husband, he said. Getting serious. Most other young ladies I met seemed more interested in my prospects than me. This honesty was another gift of marriage, the chance to say what you really feel. Stuff society silences during courtship. You knew sometimes Thomas woke from nightmares about India, and sometimes he wrestled with winter blues in gray London months. You found out he could get really cranky if provoked, that you could be stubborn and independent with family decisions, and that sometimes you cried over novels, even knowing the characters weren't real. These flaws didn't lessen your feelings, they made them deeper. You realized love isn't that fiery passion from romance novels, but a steady comfort in being truly understood. Winter brought unexpected challenges when everyone seems more interested in my prospects than, well, me. This brutal honesty is one of marriage's gifts, the ability to openly talk about feelings and experiences that polite society wouldn't dare mention during dating. You already knew that sometimes Thomas wakes from nightmares about his time in India, that he wrestles with gloom during London's gray winters. He's figured out that you're quick to anger when really pushed, that you can be stubborn and fiercely independent with family decisions, and that sometimes you cry over novels, even knowing the characters aren't real. These quirks don't lessen your bond, they deepen it. You've learned love isn't the wild passion of romance novels, but the solid comfort of truly being understood by someone else. Winter throws surprising challenges when Thomas falls ill with a fever, bedridden nearly 2 weeks. For the first time, you grasp the scary truth of true partnership. Your happiness depends on someone else's. Sometimes you even cry over novels, knowing full well the characters aren't real. These little flaws don't weaken your feelings, they actually deepen them. You've learned love isn't about fiery passion like in romance novels, but about the solid comfort of truly being understood by someone else. Winter throws some curveballs when Thomas falls ill, bedridden and feverish for almost 2 weeks. For the first time, you face the scary truth of a real partnership. The frightening reality your happiness depends on someone else's. You take care of him yourself, even though Mrs. Davies offers to handle the messier parts of nursing. You sit by his bed, reading aloud when he's awake, checking his temperature all night, preparing broth and special herbal medicines on the doctor's orders. When the fever finally breaks and Thomas looks at your face clearly for the first time in days, you realize something fundamental about the vows you took, preparing special broth and herbal medicine as the doctor advised. When the fever finally broke and Thomas's eyes saw your face clearly for the first time in days, you realized something pretty basic about the vow you made in that flower-filled church. "Hello, wife," he whispered, calm but unmistakably him. "Hello, husband," you replied, and the relief in your voice surprised you both. His recovery was slow but steady, and during those long afternoons when the baby was strong enough to sit up but too weak for normal activities, you spent hours talking about things you'd never discussed before, your childhood fears and dreams, his trip to India, the homesickness that nearly drowned him in those first months abroad, and the different futures you both imagined before meeting. I used to think I might never get married, you confessed one gloomy February afternoon while sitting by his chair mending one of his shirts. I wanted to be one of those independent women who travel, write books, and scandalize the neighbors. You still can, Thomas whispered. Write books, I mean. You do have smart observations about everything you read. That idea startled you. Writing books was something respectable women didn't do unless it was moral guidance or kids' stories. But the idea planted itself like a seed waiting for the right moment to sprout when spring returned. Thomas got promoted and a raise. You celebrated with a week-long trip to Brighton, your first getaway since the wedding. This seaside town was all the rage for couples your age, and you loved the fresh feeling of traveling together, exploring the pier and shops, strolling the beach where the ocean stretched endlessly toward France. On this trip, you realized you might be expecting your first baby. The signs were subtle, mild morning nausea, unusual tiredness, sensitivity to smells you never noticed before. You decided to wait until you were sure before telling Thomas, but the possibility made everything you saw and did more exciting. Back in London, Dr. Matthews confirmed your suspicions with the kind of gentle congratulations reserved for respectable married ladies. He estimated you were about 2 months along, which meant the baby would arrive early winter. That night, you told Thomas at dinner, watching his face shift from confused to understanding to pure joy so bright it choked you up. A baby. He said like he was testing the word. Our baby. Our baby. You confirmed. And suddenly you both laughed and cried. Pregnancy changed everything all at once. Your daily routine kept going. But now, every choice was made with the little life inside you in mind. Mrs. Davies started preparing a small room next to your bedroom as the nursery. Thomas got adorably protective, insisting on carrying anything heavier than a teacup and getting nervous whenever you were out of his sight for over an hour. Your mother visited more often now, offering plenty of advice on pregnancy and motherhood. Some tips were useful, some were fairy tales Mrs. Davies quietly rolled her eyes at. But you cherished the connection to the generations of women who had gone through this mysterious transition before you. The physical changes started slowly, then became more obvious with summer. Your dresses needed careful tailoring to fit your growing waist. You began craving weird foods you never cared about before, and suddenly hated smells you'd never noticed. Early pregnancy exhaustion gave way. Now visits more often, offering plenty of advice on managing pregnancy and preparing for motherhood. Some tips are actually useful. Some are just fairy tales Mrs. Davies quietly disagrees with. But you cherish the connection to generations of women who've navigated this mysterious transition before you. The physical changes start slowly, then get more obvious as summer arrives. Your dresses need careful tailoring to fit your growing waistline. You start craving weird foods you never cared for before, and suddenly hate smells that never bothered you. Early pregnancy exhaustion gives way to a burst of surprising energy. followed by the heavy drag of the final months. Thomas adapts patiently to every stage. When you can't bend down to tend the garden, he takes over weeding and watering. When getting around gets tough, he suggests quiet nights at home instead of social visits. When you're too big to comfortably share your usual chair in the living room, he immediately comes a phase of crazy energy, followed by the growing heaviness of the last months of pregnancy. Thomas adapts patiently through each stage. When you can't bend down to tend the garden, he takes over weeding and watering. When moving around gets tough, he suggests quiet nights in instead of social visits. When you're too big to comfortably share your usual chair in the parlor, he immediately buys a bigger chair tailored exactly to your changing needs. You're strangely thoughtful. You tell him one October evening as he helps you settle into the new chair with cushions arranged just right. You told him one October evening as he helped you settle into the new chair with cushions arranged just so that I could be properly considerate. He corrected you you're creating a person who actually seems worth caring about. The baby was born on a snowy December morning. 3 days after your second wedding anniversary, labor was long and brutal, but when Dr. Matthews finally placed your daughter in your arms, all the pain suddenly meant nothing. She was perfectly formed and wide awake, with Thomas's brown eyes and your stubborn-looking chin. She was truly beautiful, Thomas whispered, carefully sitting beside you on the bed to get a good look at his daughter for the first time. She looks just like you. She still looks just like you. You marveled at her tiny fingers gripping your hand with a surprising strength. Hello, darling. We've been waiting for you. You named her Charlotte after your favorite novelist. Despite their scandalous reputation, Charlotte Weatherby, a name that sounded both proper and a little adventurous, fitting for a daughter born in a snowstorm with a clear sense of timing. The first months of motherhood were exhausting in ways you never expected. Charlotte turned out to be a fussy baby with broken sleep and constant feeding. Mrs. Davies hired her niece Sarah to help with laundry and cleaning, but the bulk of the work was on you. Thomas helped as much as a Victorian husband could, taking over nighttime feedings when possible and playing with Charlotte while you napped in the afternoon. I never realized kids could be so intense. You confessed to Thomas one morning after a particularly rough night. She's got a strong will for someone who can't even lift her head yet. She's definitely your daughter, he said with a cheeky grin. That's a compliment, not an insult. As Charlotte grew from a demanding infant to an energetic, curious toddler, your family slowly found a new rhythm. Thomas's career was on the rise. Peterson's position came with more responsibilities and promised further promotions. You started writing seriously, beginning with articles for women's magazines about managing the household and raising children, then moving on to more ambitious projects. Your second child, James, was born when Charlotte was 2, followed by little Mary 18 months later. The Kensington house, once perfectly roomy for 2, now became chaotic with 3 little kids and staff to manage them. By your 5th wedding anniversary, you had become a pillar of your small community. Thomas served on the church board and local school council. You organized charity events for mothers and poor children, using your experience to push for practical support instead of moralizing lectures. Your dinner parties were famous for lively conversation and great food, and young couples often came to you for advice about the early challenges of marriage. One late spring evening, as you were soothing Charlotte to sleep while Thomas read to your younger kids in the nursery next door, she asked a question that caught you off guard, Mom. How did you know Dad was the right one to marry? You paused, brushing her black curls, thinking how to explain the complicated Victorian courtship process to a 5-year-old's. Well, sweetheart, we took plenty of time to get to know each other. We talked about important things and realized we enjoyed being together. But how do you know he'll be a good dad? That one was trickier. Thomas pursued you very kindly and thoughtfully, but you couldn't have known he'd become the dad who builds intricate dollhouses for his daughters and teaches his son to identify every tree in the park. I guess I wasn't really sure, you admitted, but I knew he was gentle, honest, and cared about other people's feelings. Those qualities seem like a good start for being both a good dad and a good husband. After Charlotte fell asleep, you see Thomas sitting in the living room with a book, but he puts it aside when you plop down next to him on the sofa you bought to fit your growing family. Charlotte asks how I knew he'd make a good dad. He tells her, "And what did you say? I spotted the important stuff: kindness, honesty, caring about others." You pause, watching his face under the light. "I was right, wasn't I?" "I hope so," he whispers. "I'll definitely try my best." As your kids grow up and your marriage deepens, you often think about the complicated social mechanics that brought you and Thomas together. Books on etiquette with their rigid rules, overseers watching every interaction, those formal courtship dances that, looking back, seem almost bizarre, but somehow, despite all those restrictions and conventions, something real and lasting emerged. Two people who might never have met otherwise found each other and built a life together. Not a dramatic romance novel kind of passion, but something sturdier, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and feelings that grow stronger instead of fading over time. On quiet evenings, when the kids are asleep and the house is peacefully still, you and Thomas sit together, reading or chatting about the day's events. The conversation flows as easily as your walks in the park used to, but now enriched by years of shared experience and common purpose. Ever wonder what would have happened if we never met? You ask him one evening, looking up from the letter you're writing to your cousin in Scotland. "Sometimes," he admits, "but I can't really picture it clearly anymore. This life with you and the kids feels like the only real possibility. The world around you is changing fast. Railways have revolutionized travel, letting folks visit distant relatives in hours instead of days. Psychological manipulation is becoming popular in nicer neighborhoods, pushing back the darkness that used to define winter nights. Photography is getting more sophisticated, letting families capture images of their kids at every stage of growing up. But the basic rhythm of family life stays the same. Kids still need to eat, dress, and Learn. Households still need managing and care. Marriage still depends on daily kindness and attention between partners who've chosen to bind their fates together. Looking back on your journey, from a nervous young girl to a confident wife and mother, you're impressed by how those complex Victorian courting structures, with all their stiffness and fakery, served an important purpose. They provided a framework where two strangers could size each other up and test compatibility before making a commitment that would shape the rest of their lives. The constraints that once felt suffocating, the constant supervision, the formal interaction rules, the cautious progression from acquaintance to intimacy, all created space for gradual discovery. You and Thomas learned to read each other's minds before getting physically close, to appreciate each other's personalities before committing to a shared future. You could hardly imagine modern young people finding such limits unacceptable. But you have to admit the patience those conventions demanded, building a relationship carefully on respect and mutual understanding. When you blow out the lights and head upstairs with Thomas, you feel deeply grateful for the special social mechanisms that brought you two together, without etiquette books and chaperones, without formal visiting hours and supervised strolls. You might never have discovered that the serious young man from India and the shy girl from London could create something beautiful together. Your story began with a knock on the door one spring afternoon in 1855, when two well-dressed people sat in. A special social system brought these two together, without etiquette books and chaperones, without the official structure of visiting hours and supervised walks. You might never discover that the serious young man from India and the shy young lady from London could actually create something beautiful together. Your story kicks off with a knock on the door one spring afternoon in 1855. Two well-dressed folks sitting in a flower-filled parlor, trying to figure out if they can build a life together. The story keeps unfolding in a house full of children's laughter and the comfortable silence of a couple who've learned how to really be at ease with each other. The Victorian era, with all its rigid rules and complicated social codes, set the stage where love could grow slow and steady, like carefully tended roses in a walled garden. And sometimes, just sometimes, that patience paid off with something rare and lasting, a relationship that could weather the storms of illness and change, the challenges of parenting and responsibility, the everyday job of tending to someone else's happiness as carefully as your own. That's how dating went down in Victorian times, not the wild, spontaneous passion of modern love, but something more deliberate and maybe a bit more durable, a careful dance where two people tested if they could trust each other with their future, their dreams, and their deepest hopes for happiness. When you drift off to sleep in the bed you've shared for 7 years, Thomas is breathing evenly beside you, and the quiet house surrounds your sleeping children. You realize you're part of something bigger than your own story. You're taking part in one of humanity's oldest and most persistent efforts, the ancient dance of courtship and commitment, done by the rules of your time and place. The world will keep changing, and Future generations will find their own ways to explore love and build families, but the basic human craving for connection, for partnership, for someone to share life's joys and sorrows with, will never change no matter how wildly. Social conventions shift, and maybe, just maybe, we'd be wise to take our time, move slowly, build love on friendship and respect instead of just passion. Perhaps Victorians, despite all their rules and fuss, really got the importance of patience when it comes to creating lasting happiness with another human. The last thing you remember before drifting off is Thomas's hand, finding yours between the pillows, a gesture as natural as breathing after all these. You find your hand between two pillows, a gesture as natural as breathing after all these years together. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and joys, but tonight you can rest easy knowing you made the right choice, that the careful dance of Victorian courtship led you exactly where you belong.